Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we are gonna do another engraving experiment and we'll engrave some slate. This material, this here, is quite well suited for engraving since it's not too expensive. It's easily available as thin plates and it also has a look kinda similar to a black and white photograph when it's engraved, which looks very nice. But I've never tried to engrave it with this machine, so we need to figure out the parameters and all the stuff. But we're gonna do that in this video. And we're also gonna test out my new sophisticated positioning system for this laser, which consists of a cutting mat with a grid on top. And we'll see how that works out. So without further ado, let's get right in. Before we start to engrave this slate, we have to do a little material test. Slate is a material where if you don't have enough laser power, then it won't engrave at all. And if you have too much, it will turn yellow and lose a lot of the contrast that you're looking for. So we need to do a little speed versus cutting power test. And I'm gonna show you right now how to do that in Laser GRVL. So here we are in the Laser GRVL software. And to generate us a speed versus power cutting test, we go onto the generate option and then on power versus speed test. Then it looks a bit much, but it isn't that difficult. First, we need to set our power parameters. I want to go from 10% power to 50% power. We certainly won't need more because you don't need that much power for slate. Then I want to do it in 5 steps. I don't need that many. And then I want to set the speed from like 500 to 2000 millimeters per minute. Then we would have a lower speed for if we do very complicated engravings, and then we have also high speed settings that we can use if you have very simple engravings. Again, also 5 steps. Then we need to set the parameters for the text. It's gonna also engrave the text. I'm gonna set this to 35% and the size is 50 millimeters by 50 millimeters. That's okay. We click on create and then it has created our engraving test. The density of the fill is 8 lines per millimeter for this one. Now we're done with our little cutting versus speed tests and here are the results. They look really nice and we have seen here on the right side, this is the part where we have the maximum amount of contrast. Bring it a bit closer and these are the parameters that we want to use. So now if we, let's say, want to do a very detailed engraving, we can use the 875 speed with, let's say, 40% laser power. And if we want to do a very high detail engraving, we can go up to 2000 and then use like 50% power. That's also a nice result. This was a failed attempt here, just ignore it. And now that we have all our parameters set, I'm gonna engrave my logo on it. So I have a slate coaster for my own and we can see how an actual engraved logo looks on this. And here we are inside the engraver. And this is the cutting mat I got, just a very cheap one of Amazon. And the way this works is I'm just gonna push it all the way back so it's flush against the back side. And then I can easily use the grid pattern on the cutting mat to align my workpiece. So I'm just gonna pick one of my slate pieces here. And then you can see I have this cut side and I can easily align it so that it's perfectly straight and that my engraving will be straight on this thing. On other stuff like my keychains, for example, on smaller stuff, especially where it's very important that it's properly aligned, you could easily just position it like this so that it's straight. And you could also pick like an edge here as your reference point, set this at the home point, mark it with a Sharpie, and then you have a fixed reference point for all your engravings. And this should help. Obviously, it's not suited for laser cutting because it's plastic, it would blast right through. But for normal engraving, this is a very nice solution to get more accurate engravings. And here are the results of the engraving. It looks super, super clean. I really like how this looks. There's such a great contrast on here. The infill, I think if you have a lot of flat surfaces, you would need to raise it a tiny bit. You can see some slight slivers where it hasn't quite filled in. So maybe go up to 9 lines per millimeter. Just one line, I think, should do the trick. And yeah, it's just awesome. I've also found online some people like sanded this down before engraving, and some other people used like a clear varnish on them, but I don't really think it's necessary. Maybe sanding, if you want to, sanding would enable you to reuse one. If you failed an engrave, you can just sand it down and engrave it again. That's certainly nice, but for anything else, I wouldn't bother with it because it's so clean. And if you put like clear varnish on it and you actually use it as a coaster, I would imagine that the varnish would crack at some point, and then yeah, it would look terrible. And with this, like nothing can happen to it except like if it would actually crack, someone would put the gas on it too hard, then it would shatter. But otherwise, it's super, super clean. And here we are at the end of our little experiment again. And I'm super happy with how it turned out. The contrast is amazing on these slate coasters, and the material test also really helps. With like wood and leather, you can you have a lot of leeway, you know, and you can kinda go with 50% power and it's probably gonna turn out okay. But with this material, you really need to do a material test because you have a quite narrow band of like speeds and feeds that you can use. So definitely run one of those, even if it takes like 20 minutes on your engraver, it's still worth it. That was it for this video. I hope you liked it and you found it interesting. If you did, then consider subscribing to the channel and giving the video a like, and then I will see you on the next one. Bye bye.